that way.
Is December 19th, and we are here at 6:30 for a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees. We will call both those meetings to order, and if you will join us with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and then with that, Claire, would you do a roll call for both the board and then the Planning Commission?
Sure. I don't have the list in front of me, but I will do the board first. Bartlett,
Yes.
Walters,
Yes.
Friend,
Yep.
Lyle,
Here.
and Forte and Cook
And Cortade.
Cortade and Cook are excused.
Right.
Okay, Planning Commission, Gonzalez.
Here.
Richardson.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Headley.
Here.
Leonard.
Here.
Lassam.
Present.
Ferguson.
Here.
Okay, with that, I think we'll ask either of the boards if there's a conflict of interest. Is there any conflict of interest? Okay, seeing none, we'll, approval of the agenda. We will remove the fiscal year-end budget amendments. As I mentioned to Glenn, we had BSNA in this week, taking us from .NET to the cloud, so we didn't quite get those under our belt, so we'll be bringing those back. So we'll take agenda item 7A off, and then ask if there's approval for the agenda. And we'll take a motion, one for the Township Board when that's done, and then we'll take one for the Planning Commission.
I make a motion to approve the agenda with the removal of 7A.
Support.
Motion made by Bartlett, support by Walters. All in favor of the board indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed by no? Okay, that motion passes.
I'd entertain a similar motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the Planning Commission and Board of Trustees agenda for Tuesday, December 19th, removing 7A.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Mindy, seconded by Steve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries.
Okay, and from there, we will move on to public comment. This is an opportunity for public comment by anyone attending to the Planning Commission or to the Township Board. Feel free to make your way to the podium, introduce yourself, and offer a comment. We do have a 3-minute time limit that we utilize, so with that, we're welcome to any public comment.
Good evening and happy holidays. Judy Nemitz, East Bay Township resident. I'd like to plant a possible seed for a consideration for a design master plan for a township center. What are the future plans beyond the master plan? Would East Bay Township ever consider a design master plan approach? Do you want to maintain the status quo of a bedroom community and be a suburb of Traverse City? Do you want to attract younger people? Presently, we are a car-oriented community with little community connection to any type of township center. As we look to the future, does East Bay Township want to create a township center, not merely a drive-by, a quick stop and grab and go strip stores of pizza, Subway, haircuts, fast nails, gas, and grocery? Do we want a placemaking destination that will connect the community and continue to be a suburb of Traverse City? People of all ages are attracted to a community by places that offer a connection of mixed housing, mixed use, like a 2- and 3-story residential, coffee shop, higher-end public houses, restaurant, retail, and green space that would offer maybe even a community center that could house a library or an educational center or a community center that could offer community gatherings and activities. I suggest tonight that it might be worth a thought to consider a design master plan for a township center. A website and a firm called Gibbs Urban Planning out of Birmingham, Michigan might be a place to start. So I thank you for your time tonight and happy holidays.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Hello, everyone. My name is Finnegan Pichet. I'm a lifelong resident here in Traverse City and East Bay Township. As someone who grew up in the area and attended high school at GTA just up the road here, I've witnessed increasing challenges in finding affordable housing. I've been pre-approved and have made offers on multiple homes in the area, and I can see our area needs more housing opportunities so young people like myself can stay in this beautiful area where we've grown up instead of having to move away. As someone who would like to purchase a home and live in Traverse City in the future, I fully support the initiative for increased housing density in our township, as it shall provide more opportunities for young people like myself to purchase homes and contribute towards the community. Thank you all for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Hello, how are you?
Hi. Yes, I won the Ugly Sweater contest today, so thank you. And I am here to talk about multifamily development and considering changing or adopting something a little bit different. Now, I'm going to have a hard time with the 3 minutes, so you can give me the, all right, because I talk a lot. So with that being said, I have currently under project 240 units at Chelsea Park, 520 units at Morgan Farms, 189 units at Oak Shores, 350 units at West Shore, Ruth Park, Annika Place. I sit on the HBA board, I sit on the Builders Exchange Committee, and I'm very involved in the community with multifamily housing. Being said this, a lot of them, some of them are not doing it the way I think it could be done with, you right now have a density of 3 per acre, and if we did the 3 per acre on a development here in the community, you'd have to use all the property. If you condense it down to more units like we did at Oak Shores, you guys familiar with Oak Shores in Acme? Have you guys been in Acme lately? Drove through Acme? There's Oak Shores is the old Tom's and Kmart, repurposed both of those properties. We are ripping out blacktop and putting in trees because it was done right. The opposite of the way most developers think. Let's get the trees back. Let's take the environment back. Let's really get involved with doing this the right way with smaller, more rentals on a smaller piece of property to be able to save more of the land. And it's kind of opposite how a lot of the developers think. So that's something I want to talk about. I sit on the steering committee at the college, at NMC, for the construction trades. And we need more students in the trades at any age, more people in the trades. There's not a day that goes by that somebody doesn't ask me for a plumber, an electrician, somebody to paint, somebody to frame, every single day, because there's nobody in the trades. These job sites that I mentioned, go to them. Go to them and look at them. I'll take you to them. I'd love to do it off free time, whatever. But there are very few people that speak English on these job sites. All these jobs are from out of town. All these people are being, all my siting groups are all coming from out of town because there's no place for these people to live that can afford them. I'll give you one example and then I'll cut my time. Chelsea Park, a 1-bedroom. Overlooking the parking lot with 2 parking spots, with a 1-year lease. How much for a 1-bedroom? Brand new at Chelsea Park. Chelsea Park's just behind Applebee's. Who knows, on Hartman.
Don't quiz us, just go ahead and give your comment.
$2,300 a month for 1-bedroom. That's not affordable housing, okay? They can't live here, they can't work here, they can't, all these jobs, these construction jobs are all coming in from out of town because these people can't afford to live here. So that's my 3 minutes. God bless, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment?
Hello, my name is Sally Erickson, and we have 90 acres in your township, south of the railroad tracks, and connecting to the Hilbert Beekeeper Farm, and now Jason Send owns that property. So just so you know where we are, between 4 Mile and 5 Mile. We are 100% in favor of higher density. My children and my children's friends, more of my children's friends, are suffering from the same situation that the young man described. They cannot find housing in our area. And East Bay, whether you want to call it a bedroom community or you want it to be a town center, our particular parcel does have that opportunity to offer that to that section of East Bay Township. We have the railroad coming through, we have the TART trail coming through, and I would really appreciate you thinking about giving more density so that we can house our people here in this region.
Thank you for your comment. Additional public comment? Hello, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good.
My name is Amanda Mikowski, and I live with my young family in East Bay Township. I'm in favor of increasing the housing density of the township, specifically the zoning density of the parcels that make up the 220 vacant acres near US 31, because it could meet some of the major housing needs within Traverse City. My husband and I are one of the two families who own the parcels that make up the total, so I'd like to share some information with you about it. I'd like to highlight that we're not talking about like 5 acres here and then like 10 acres a mile away. This is a continuous 220-acre vacant parcel near the heart of Traverse City. The vast majority of the land is rolling, dry, and habitable, and without wetlands to preserve. It's currently under contract with a very capable developer who has a proven track record of successful and tastefully built projects in Traverse City. We've built a friendship with them and truly believe that they want to see Traverse City continue to thrive as much as we do. Some geographical points of reference. This property does back up to Sally's property, her 90 acres as well. It's from the 5-mile access, it's about 1.3 miles by car to Cherry Tree Inn. Also right across the street from the point of 5 mile is the Holiday Woodland Preserve. The property has access from 4 Mile Road as well. As you all are aware, the sewer is located off of 4 Mile and the water is located off of 5 Mile, making this a prime area for utilizing those utilities that the township has already brought in. It's also easily accessible for the Beta bus route, the TART trail, and the safe routes to school. Having a parcel like this developed would require a major developer to come in. These utilities are not currently easily accessible for single-family use, and so pulling these utilities further down into East Bay Township would make the utilities more accessible for local families. As we know, workforce and middle-income housing has been a hot-button topic for Traverse City for years. It will continue to be a need that needs to be met on a very large scale. I come from a family of local builders on a much smaller scale, and in many forms of production, the costs of labor and materials go down per unit as the opportunities to scale increase. The same is true for building homes. In order to keep the costs to build down and the costs to rent or to purchase down, there needs to be a high level of production, which is possible with this piece of property. The higher the density, the lower the cost to build can be. The lower the cost to build, the lower the rents will be, and the more accessible housing becomes for people of our generation to live in Traverse City. I urge you to please see these parcels as a solution to meet the very real needs of housing in Traverse City by considering not the minimum enforceable, but the highest and best use of the land in terms of meeting the housing needs of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Good evening. My name is Jacob Mikowski. I'm Amanda's husband. I'm also an East Bay Township resident. Thank you so much for hosting Housing North this evening. I reviewed Housing North's housing needs assessment and their summary report for our county, and I strongly support their best practice recommendations. Their analysis showed that our township needs over 1,300 housing units over the next 5 years, which is part of the county's larger need for 11,000 additional homes by 2027. I agree with their next steps to consider, which include updating the master plan to align with the zoning reform toolkit and focusing on zoning efforts where access to sewer and water is readily available. The zoning reform toolkit recommended trading density for better design to increase housing type compatibility and make development easier by reducing lot sizes, unit sizes, and different housing types to address the missing middle housing. Their cost-benefit analysis showed that where there is an underlying zoning code that might permit 3 to 6 units per acre, allowing for 9 to 12 units per acre or more can provide for significant cost reductions on a portion of the homes. The research showed that limiting the land available for medium and higher density development raises housing prices because it creates an artificial restriction on supply. I believe that the application for updating the zoning from low to moderate for parcels between 4 and 5 mile, of which I'm an owner, discussed by the Planning Commission earlier this month, is a great example where you can apply Housing North's best practices. These parcels are within designated urban growth boundaries. They have access to public water and sewer, and they are some of the limited remaining parcels within the township that do not include sensitive environmental areas, are not incorporated into protected lands like the Land Conservancy, Holiday Woodland Natural Area, or other properties protected in perpetuity from development. Allowing greater density in areas like this that meet these conditions would reduce development costs and provide more workforce homes and apartments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? And if you have a public comment too, just feel free to make your way up and stand right behind her. Hello, thank you.
Good evening, Carol Kusel, East Bay Township citizen. As you look back on your year of work, please keenly note that a large percentage of East Bay residents choose to live in our township because of its proximity to the conveniences of Traverse City and other municipalities, and most importantly, because of the natural beauty and recreational opportunities within our township. Many citizens clearly outlined those desires throughout the master plan process and now through the ordinance rewrite subcommittee process. The rampant forest tear down and building expansion in Garfield Township, especially on Hammond and Lafreniere, are not part of what most East Bay Township residents desire. Studies show significant increases in health risks for those living in areas with air pollution, including cognitive decline and increases in cardiovascular and cerebral vascular disease. Now, as you look ahead towards the new year of possibilities and decisions on new construction and the ordinance rewrite, consider that many people understand that some development will occur, but what kind and where are the key. Our township's Miracle Mile does not need more motels. It is already Motel Mile. Consider a park instead of lowering the stream setback in favor of another motel. Our township needs an attractive town center that offers our residents and others opportunities to shop for needs and wants, congregate and socialize under a tree canopy, exercise and be entertained, walk a dog, or stroll with your family and friends. Consider and encourage that in your plans. Large subdivisions and commercial development should be in areas where municipal sewage treatment is available. When considering larger developments or increasing the density to fit a development, be sure the infrastructure is there. Studies show that seepage from septic systems does indeed get into the groundwater and the aquifers from which many of us get our drinking water. I could go on and on. Development is destined to happen. It's your role to manage it, to plan for it. In the process, I strongly urge you to prioritize the environment, protect our forests and waterways. They sustain us, and they are the two major reasons why people choose to live in our East Bay Township.
Thank you. Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Good. My name is Jason Send. I live in the township here, over off of 5 Mile Road. And my wife and I and 2 kids have grown up there now. And here, guess what? In support of some higher density. We appreciate that the township has done a lot to help with the housing need in the area with some of the other projects that have gotten approved and have been moving forward. And that's great to see. As we know, I'm sure we're going to hear that we need a lot more units here in the city, in the township, and the surrounding area from the presentation tonight. But I guess the one thing that I want to kind of talk about is how multifamily can equal more space. We're at a meeting previously. We're talking about low density, and Holiday Hills came up in the discussion, and how you drive through there and it's nice single-family homes that are spread out on quarter-acre lots, but then they're one right after another, after another, after another, because in order to fit the density, you're using up every single square inch of that acre. Whereas like the medium-density zoning, you can go to multifamily, where those same eight units they can fit per unit, or per acre, you can easily do a 16-unit building on 1 acre, and that frees up another acre to preserve. So thanks for your time, and that's what I got.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Okay. With that, we will move on. I don't believe we had any correspondence on the packet. Okay. And we'll move to the business before the board and commission. First, I do want to thank all of you for being here tonight. It's hard to get two boards together on any given night, but we really appreciate being here with our planning commission and thankful for the work that you guys do on a monthly basis, and sometimes even more than monthly, right? A couple special meetings thrown in there through the year, and we really appreciate it. So on the agenda is the Housing North presentation, and if you don't have any qualms, we'll turn it over to Claire to introduce and talk about our subject.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Just gonna move this out to Yarrow. So we've got, Yarrow Brown is here this evening, and I'm really excited to have an opportunity to have a discussion about housing in East Bay. I think it's great timing to have both boards together to kind of have this presentation about best practices. The timing is perfect because beginning in early 2024, the Planning Commission is going to be reviewing the entire zoning ordinance. We've been working for over a year on this draft zoning ordinance. I haven't seen the full draft yet, but it will be ready in early January. So as you know, the recently adopted master plan from 2023 has a strong focus on housing, and that was a big topic of conversation, among others, but that was a big conversation that the Planning Commission had looked at over the course of the couple years that we worked on the master plan update. The master plan looks at housing solutions that will support a growing workforce and meet the shifting needs of demographics in our community. The master plan speaks specifically to removing zoning barriers. So that's one tool, and that's kind of one of the most powerful tool that you'll hear from Yarrow that local units of government have. It requires a partnership of many different partners, but a tool that we have is removing barriers to housing. So some of the items that we identified in our master plan and are drafted in our new zoning ordinance are increasing the types of homes that are permitted, reducing the minimum lot size, getting rid of the minimum home size, and then also looking at density. The future land use map, dating back to almost 10 years ago, had a vision for future densities in our township. And so the draft ordinance that the Planning Commission will be reviewing attempts to realize those densities. So basically pairing the future land use map with the reality, which is the legal basis, the zoning. So that's another item that we'll be looking at with the zoning ordinance update. So super excited to have Yarrow Brown here, Executive Director with Housing North, to share some of the trends for our region, to talk about best practices related to zoning. And then she's also going to talk about some of the taxing incentives and those types of tools that many are newly available tools that local units of government have available to them. So as I mentioned, local government is just one piece of the puzzle. It requires partnership, but I think it's a really critical element for us to get the zoning right. And so I'm excited about this educational opportunity.
Hi.
Hi,
Thanks
how
for
are
having
you?
me. I think I was here back in maybe 2021. Was that when I presented to you? Okay. So I'm going to just go through some slides. I hope that if you have questions, you can stop me, that this can be more of a conversation. And I'll just get started. I think a lot of points were already made here that I am going to make. But for those of you who don't know Housing North, we are a 10-county regional nonprofit. We are also the lead for Region D, or our region for the statewide housing plan. And so we recently completed a regional housing plan, which ties into all of what I'm talking about. And we focus, as you can see on the slide here, the 10 counties in Northwest Michigan, from Manistee over to Wexner-Woonsocket and up to the bridge in Grand Traverse County, of course. And we have what we call 3 legs of our stool that we focus on. So we do not build housing and we do not put people in housing, but we focus on communications and awareness, policy advocacy, and capacity and resources all around housing in our region. So just to kind of set the context for what is affordability, affordability is relative. In general, we really don't want people to be paying more than 30% of their income on housing. This chart I stole from Jim Tischler at the State Land Bank because I think it does help kind of show why Housing North exists and the work that has been being done across the income spectrum. So I should say that at Housing North, we work across the income spectrum from those experiencing homelessness all the way up to what is now 120% of the area median income, and market rate housing would be above that 120%. Some of the acronyms on this slide, LIHTC or LIHTC stands for Low Income Housing Tax Credit, and then CDBG stands for Community Development Block Grant. So basically, when you get into the orange, the attainable housing and market rate housing, there are very few resources or opportunities, tax incentives to help bring those housing units down to a price point that would be affordable to those within that income category. And I should point out that your income is based on your household size as well. So there's a link on our website if you want to get into the weeds of all the area median income details. So you probably saw me present some very different numbers. A few years ago, we have a new housing needs assessment, which many of you had linked, and I just kind of want to give the broad brushstrokes to this. So this is the 10-county region. You can see that Grand Traverse County has the highest bar there, and that is where the bulk of the need is in our region. But this is a 2023 study that focuses on the need for housing in our region from 2022 to 2027. And it showed that including market rate, we need about 31,000 units in our region, and that includes for sale and rental units. Now, the number recommendations are not black and white. We know that about 3/4 of our region does prefer home ownership or for sale housing. However, right now it's really unattainable to many in our region because they cannot save or are paying too much for rent to be able to get into home ownership, and then they're priced out of home ownership. This next slide just kind of shows that breakdown between home ownership and rental and the different income categories, and focusing on the bulk of the need for rentals was in those making 50% or less of the AMI, and the bulk of the need for home ownership was in the missing middle or 80 to 120. But there is a need across the income spectrum and in the different home ownership or rental categories. I think you all know where we are, but I just like to put a little context to the population of Grand Traverse County, which is about 31% of the entire region, and then your township population, which covers about 11%. So we did a fair share analysis of the housing needs assessment to give you an idea of what you would need in your township, but that is not based on an assessment done just for your township. So keep that in mind. And then this slide, it's really hard to read, but I can also email you this offline. This basically shows the different types of occupations that might exist in our region, how much those people are making. And then if you look at the red check marks, or X's, and the green check marks, that says whether or not people in those occupations would be able to rent or own in Grand Traverse County. We also have this for all of our counties, and you can see that there are a lot of red check marks. And I would say 100% of those are in the homeownership line. We also have an extremely low vacancy rate.
Go back to that.
Oh, yeah.
What are the red check marks meaning again?
That the person in that income category would be unable to rent or own. If it's a green check mark, they would be able to likely find a place.
Okay, thank you.
So this next slide just kind of illustrates why we have such a need in our region. In Grand Traverse County, your vacancy rate is 0.9%. You want that in a healthy market to be between 4% and 6%. So at the time the study was done, which was in February of 2023, there was very little available in the homeownership range. Most of them were $400,000 or more, which is unattainable to many in our region. And then it looked at both multifamily and the non-conventional rentals, and there were very few available in Grand Traverse County. This report is available at 600 pages on our website, but if you want to look at it county by county, you can do that for Grand Traverse, and then we have a 2-page or 3-page where it distills it down into a little more. So this is just a couple slides about the gap estimates for rental units and kind of the breakdown between the different income categories. So you can see here the bulk of the need for rentals is for those making 50% or less of the AMI, but we do need it across the spectrum. And then for sale units. So in East Bay Township, we estimate that you need see if I put it on here, about 1363 units if we did the fair share analysis, including both for sale and rental units. What we're experiencing in our region is that the lack of availability for these units is causing a step-down effect, and so many people who make more are stepping down and scooping up those units that could be available to those that are making less, and so there's just an imbalance right now in the housing market. So you guys have a great master plan. I'm kind of here to celebrate that you're a township who's doing what we hope. You're becoming housing ready. Step 1, update your master plan. Include language about housing that reflects the goals and the needs of your township. So I just pulled out a few quotes, which I think I wanted to highlight that you need a diverse range of housing options. You do have a lot of natural area in the region for sure, and a natural land, but including areas where you would intensify that or concentrate development would be important to protect those natural resources. But looking at a community, you want to be a community that's welcoming to all households and do support a wide range of housing options. So we have a zoning reform toolkit, which I think I included in your packet. Before that, we had a housing ready checklist. The housing ready checklist is a lot more detailed, and we're updating it right now, but they kind of align with each other. The zoning reform toolkit came out after we used that tool. And in red are all the things you're already incorporating into your zoning ordinance. So I just wanted to highlight that and say that we're really excited that you're kind of following these best practices that we outline to be able to follow through from your master plan. You all know that better than me, so I'm not going to dive into all the details. I also just wanted to highlight from Strong Towns, which is a resource we follow, that there are 6 zoning reforms every municipality should adopt, and I think you're already highlighting many of these as well. So there's a link on this that you can go to that article that I mentioned afterwards. But I think really looking at ways that you can encourage smaller square footage units, eliminate parking requirements, help to streamline the approval process, things that would lower the cost, which I will get into in a minute here. So zoning alone doesn't automatically make housing affordable. I think we all know that. But it is one step that can help create the environment for that development. And you do need to have reasonable standards, but you also need to consider how some of the zoning may help increase the cost, or may contribute to increasing the cost of development, and ways that the zoning can help bring more affordable or attainable housing to your region. It's expensive. Have you guys figured that out? It's really expensive to build. I think everybody's talking about that. These numbers are sort of very general. I would say that right now in our region, on average, it's about $300 a square foot to build, give or take. So we know that lower square footage can help reduce that cost in general, and not everybody needs a larger home or wants to live in a large home. They also care about lowering their overall costs of utilities and other things. So construction costs, any way we can help reduce those costs. And this next slide just kind of talks about like the overall costs of development. Land is an expense, so anytime we can reduce that cost of land. Construction obviously is really, really expensive, and the design, these are all ranges because it really does depend on the type of project, how much time it takes. So if a site plan review takes 18 months, that's going to make that project, the cost even go up. And local zoning and the permitting process does have an impact on all 5 of these. So just wanted to kind of point that out when you think about projects in your township and when they come to you, and the ways that the zoning changes you're making are going to really help make housing more affordable. Again, these are just kind of average numbers, but home sizes do have a direct impact on housing costs. So if you wanted to build something that was 1,000 square foot, that would be affordable likely right now to somebody who's making about $86,000 a year.
It costs more to build a smaller house than it does a larger house. I don't understand that.
It depends, and I'm not a builder here, but I think it depends on your scale, and it's expensive to build in general, so if you're going to build, you do want to probably build many small homes. It's also more energy efficient to build a small home, but size does matter, I guess, in this case, and if you're building many smaller homes, you can house more people per square foot. Does that make sense?
One of the things
I can answer that.
You go first.
Big or small, you still have 4 walls. When you're reducing it, you're taking out the cheap square footage. So you still have mobilization costs, you still have dirt work costs, but you're taking out the cheap square footage.
Thank you.
Okay, so it isn't the house itself, it's all the dirt work and,
Just everything that goes into it, it's just, you still have the four walls, you're just taking out the cheap portion of those four walls for when you reduce it, but it's still intensive.
okay, one other question on that. These prices are figured out when the price of lumber went sky high?
No, these are, again, just an example. These are not based on reality necessarily. This is just
Oh,
an example
okay.
to prove a point. Yeah, I didn't have the time to figure out the actual real numbers, but this is just to kind of make a point for this presentation.
Okay, thank you.
I would say here, these probably would be quite higher than this.
Well, the reason I asked that is because when lumber was up for 35, 40 bucks for a sheet of OSB, and it's down to 13 bucks now or so, I don't think the price of the house come down a square foot. So that's one angle that I look at, that somebody's still making more money because the money, when the price of lumber came down and the price of the house square foot didn't, there was more money there for somebody.
Going to-
Yes, and I would say that we all need,
There's a labor shortage, I mean, drywallers getting paid
I
more
understand.
than what they work because you can't find them.
and there, any developer, even a nonprofit developer, even a LIHTC developer needs to take home a fee to be able to pay people and to be able to then do the next project. So I guess I also just wanted, to talk a little bit about construction costs and sort of the lot width, which you are doing in your township. So reducing the minimum lot width does help with your overall construction costs and does allow you to get in more units. So in northern Michigan, on average, an improved lot, it costs about $1,000 per square foot. You do have infrastructure and opportunity in your region, so any way you can encourage that development where there's existing infrastructure, but also basically help to pay for the infrastructure you've already invested in, and look at ways you can add more units on that existing lot, if that makes sense. So that, this is just another illustration of that. So right now, if you were to sell this land, and then typically, banks don't want you to pay more than, 3 times what the cost of land is on your house. So being able to reduce that land size will help more units be put in and will help make it more attainable to people who can then get a mortgage or finance that opportunity. So I guess I just wanted to point out that the zoning changes you're making are going to help. And anytime you can add increased density close to infrastructure on an existing land while protecting the natural resources is recommended in zoning best practices. So we have some tools. So once you do the zoning changes, which we hope, will really benefit the community, there are some new tools that will help attract different types of development that will hopefully make them attainable or available to those in your workforce or in your year-round residency. So these are live links to each of these tools. These are 5 tools that did not exist before 2022. Housing North and the Housing Michigan Coalition and many partners were behind bringing these to our region, and we already have people using these tools. So I just wanted you to know that they're available, to learn more about them if a project does come to you. And this is sort of how my brain works, to know which one is multifamily, which one is for which tool. Some of them are available to your average person who would just want to invest in a duplex or a single-family home. Some of them are going to be for more multifamilies projects. The HTIF, or Brownfield TIF for housing, we just had a project in Antrim County that was approved, our first housing Brownfield TIF. And so I just wanted to make sure you know it's available and that it can be stacked and used with some of the other tools that I mentioned. So the goal is to help make assure that these projects will be affordable up to that 120% of the area median income. And while that tool is in place, those units can only be used for year-round housing. So I wanted to celebrate and recognize that many of our communities are making these zoning changes as well as you, and just give you some links and examples. We also have some success stories and some links about why these zoning changes, which you probably already know, but just some added reading to just say how important these are to our region, because we really cannot move forward and house with the need from the housing assessment without these zoning changes, as well as some examples from other communities. Frankfurt is listed on here, as well as Emmett County, Suttons Bay, many others. And then the tools that are being put to action. So in Traverse City, we had the first pilot for workforce housing approved. We've also, like I mentioned, the Brownfield TIF for housing in Antrim County. Cadillac Lofts is an example that used a neighborhood enterprise zone and also used a TIF. And then the city of Frankfurt is working on those 2 new districts that were on that list, the attainable housing and the residential facility. So as you dive into these tools or have a request, just know there's already communities that are doing it, and you can willingly plagiarized their examples. And then 2 new tools, well, the pattern book for the 21st century, I think is just something to consider if you do want to streamline some approval processes or use them as a guide. They have plans and templates for a multiple of duplexes, triplexes, quads, and then they just came out with the missing middle mixtape. So I encourage you to go on there and learn more. There's plans for ADUs and other examples of how we can streamline that approval process and use these pattern books to create more housing that meets your community needs. Lastly, I'll just kind of wrap up because I want to see if you have any questions, but this is my team. If you do have any questions or want to reach out to us, we are also expanding our Housing Ready program, so we hope to place somebody in your county here relatively soon to be able to help with all things housing. So thanks for having me, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Very good, thank you. Claire, do you want to facilitate any questions?
Sure. I don't have a microphone, but can everyone hear me?
You can yell loud enough.
Okay. And I can share with Carl. So I do think, Yarrow, do you want to go back to that slide that showed like the 16 best practices? I did want to just highlight that because the draft zoning ordinance has been reviewed by the subcommittee. So Paul, Carl, Matt Cortade, Beth have seen the draft zoning ordinance. It hasn't been in front of the Planning Commission yet, but you'll see those are, the Michigan Association of Planning has 15 tools that they recommend for zoning reform. They came out with this great toolkit. And so I did want to just highlight that we have been following that toolkit closely. And so you'll see the 15 tools are identified on that table. The ones in red are the ones that we've integrated into our draft zoning ordinance. So just as for a little bit of background, as you start to go through the draft zoning ordinance and you're reviewing some of the housing changes that we've made, those are kind of the basis for where those are coming from. We're looking at reducing the minimum lot width. We're looking at rezoning for mixed-use multifamily. So one example is in our regional business district, we're looking at allowing multifamily as a use by right. Reducing or eliminating minimum dwelling size. We're looking at expanding the administrative review for uses permitted by right, not having as many public hearings. Expanding allowable uses, reducing or eliminating parking minimums. That's the process that we just recently went through where we have a lot more flexibility with parking. If there's beta, if there's bike access, those types of things, we have some reductions in place. We're looking at density and height bonuses. So if a developer is looking at providing a guarantee, so a long-term guarantee of a certain income restriction, we're looking at providing either a density or height bonus. And so we've got some language in the draft ordinance. So I did want to just highlight those as some of the provisions we're looking at.
On the height, would that just be within the commercial rather than residential? I mean, I can't, unless you're putting a big apartment house, I guess maybe that would do it. But that's what you're looking at.
Yeah,
is
so right
getting-
now the draft would be that the bonus would be up to 25%, whether that's height or density. So yeah, it could potentially take a, apartment building from 35 feet up to
50,
45
60.
feet. Yeah, 40, a little less than 45 feet.
Claire, for clarification, because one of the things, being involved with local government that perks my ears is less public hearings. But could you explain the distinction between right now that we have public hearings for use by right and how what that means?
So we are looking at still having public hearings for a lot of our uses by right if it's a large, development, certain number of units. But there are some public hearings. For example, we hold a public hearing when Cherry Tree Inn wanted to add a few, residential units to their, or convert their, some of their employee housing to hotel rooms. So there's a number of public hearings that we have right now where the Planning Commission doesn't have any, there's black and white standards in place, so there's not a lot of action for the Planning Commission to take. It's kind of yes or no. And so it's slowing down the process in some instances by bringing some of these plans or proposals in to the planning commission that in some instances, it's more conducive to an administrative review because the standards are black and white. And so there's not much of a role for a planning commission. When you have a full landscape plan, you've got a large development, then that's the type of developments that we're still looking at having planning commission review.
And really, that piece of the public engagement still has happened. It's just happened earlier in setting those standards. And if they adhere to that, then there's not really a choice, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Mindy?
I have a question for Yarrow. So in your advocacy and awareness work, I guess the first question is, how often are developers involved, the ones that come before us regularly with plans, and how, if they are involved, how do you find that their market-driven decisions or what they want to do match what the data is telling you needs to happen?
Mostly, yeah. I mean, we don't, our staff doesn't work with developers necessarily directly unless it's through our Housing Ready program, and we help kind of connect them with the right opportunity and the right, community, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think they are wise, and they look at the housing needs assessment, and they are here, especially if they want to build less than market rate housing. They are using that to figure out where to go and how to, best use the tools to hit those needs in the community. But yes, there are a lot of market rate developers, and they are certainly out there. But I think those that want to build in this, what I talked about, the 120% or below, they are here because they want to be here, and they're trying to find the best opportunity to do that, to be able to meet the needs.
And their needs are consistent with the things that you've outlined as the best practices, or what would help them get it done is consistent with the best practices you've outlined in the zoning.
I believe so. I mean, I believe they were, consulted during that. I mean, I think obviously more density is always requested and needed, especially given the scale and the type of the project. So, they are looking at the opportunities, especially looking at growth boundaries and, where it would make sense to have higher density, because it is expensive to build, and they want to make sure it can work with all of the financing, that is out there, and how complicated it is to build a housing project.
Mindy, what was your question?
I have two. On these, I'll call them condo developments, but they could be apartments, they could be condos, these larger buildings with individual units that are condoized. Have you seen any issues with mortgages and/or insurance for private purchases? I know that my parents, when they had a condo at Harbor Lights in Frankfurt, nobody could get a mortgage on those to save their lives. So I'm just wondering if that has loosened up. That was a few years ago. But also the insurance requirement on those for sale units in buildings like that has been complicated.
I don't know if I can speak to that necessarily. I haven't heard that. That's not, where I get involved directly, but, I do, I've heard it kind of anecdotally, but I think, it is right now difficult for people even to get approved right now for, traditional, financing, and it's really high interest rates, too. So I can't really speak to that. I don't know if anybody else can, but.
I could chime in just a little bit. Part of it is the percentage of units that are maintained by the developer, and then the other part of it is how many are rental versus owner-owned. So when you start getting that tipping scale of over 50%, maybe even, it might even be 30 or 40, of rentals, lenders don't like that. So that's, and I know the ones you're talking about are probably majority rental. They're all owned. Right, but they're not. But they're also. They're not. They're not full-time. Right. Mm-hmm. They're in a rental program mostly. So, and then they also, there's that borderline of them feeling a little bit like a hotel. You know what I mean? It's they put them in a rental program. So is it, it's just, it gets real tricky with the lending.
Mindy, did you have a second point or question?
Oh, it was the mortgage and the insurance, so it was two.
Oh, okay, okay. And then, Paul. This is why I always have the name placards, just a little bit. The name placards are really for me and not for the public.
You pointed out, this kind of doubles down to Colin's question. You pointed out a number of success stories. Sutton's Bay, and Traverse City, blah, blah, blah. What has been your experience as far as the reduction of cost? I mean, you know, if we do all these things, but it doesn't really materialize into what I would consider to be a substantial reduction, what has been your experience in these success stories?
They need to stack them with the housing tools and the other opportunities, grants, or tax abatements that will help encourage those reductions, and that the cost isn't passed on to the tenant. And it also, yes, I would say there are very few projects that can create workforce or attainable housing without some sort of subsidy or partnership.
So it really hasn't brought down the cost of the housing. You're saying it's more subsidized to bring down the affordability?
I would say there was probably a partnership or a tool or a resource that they've used to do that in non-market rate. I think Common Grounds is one example in Traverse City that has created some affordable housing through a very creative capital stack where they have some market rate, some short-term, and then some affordable units. So there's a variety of examples out there. I think if it's a partnership with a nonprofit developer, for example, like Homestretch, you know, often they have access to different opportunities or tools. If they're an RRC community, you know, they can apply for some support through MEDC or other programs. But right now, I would say it is impossible to build an affordable unit. You know, it's about $300 a square foot to build. So to be able to get that down, you do need some support or partnership through a unit of government or a tax abatement or other program. But these zoning changes will help reduce the overall, you know, costs in a sense to be able to bring in some more density to create a project. Yes.
Maybe not practical, but in addition to that, how do you guard against situations where people will, we have had an example where people created rental units and then down the line in a very short time they switched them and said, okay, fine, now it's going to be a condo. So it kind of was a bait and switch on different things. Do you have anything that you would provide that would, let's say, have certain guarantees that we would have to establish with the developer that these things would not happen?
It depends on the goal. Housing North has a deed restriction program for year-round housing that we have in the city of Charlevoix, so that is one. It's not an affordability deed restriction, it's just to guarantee that it stays year-round, so that it's either for a year-round rental or year-round homeowner. There are other, so if you do use one of the tax abatements or the tools that are available, they do have to be for year-round housing, and they have to be, you know, income restricted below 120%, so that's monitored and observed. There is also community land trust, which is a shared equity model. But really, a lot of the tools and the agreements between, I guess, the municipality and the developer do, you know, a deed restriction, I think, would be one of the main ways to do that, to assure they are going to be for, you know, a certain percentage of your workforce or at a certain AMI.
Hey, Yarrow, do you mind, would you mind highlighting the pilot ordinance and talk a little bit about that? Because I know Traverse City just recently adopted pilot ordinance with the new updated state legislation, and so I think something that East Bay Township that we're looking to learn a little bit more about and potentially use that as a tool.
Yeah, certainly. So pilot or payment in lieu of taxes is actually a negotiated agreement between the developer and the unit of government. Historically, it was tied to a low-income housing tax credit project or a federally or state subsidized project where it was a requirement. Now that has been opened up and is allowed for a developer or a nonprofit developer to apply to a unit of government. They create an ordinance which outlines the terms of the pilot, and you agree on a percentage of the shelter rents that you would essentially pay instead of the normal tax bill. There's an agreement on, and I think in the case of Traverse City, it was a 10% pilot. So that is something that happens at the city or township level, and then in the case of the new tool, it does have to go to the county for them to also make some decisions as well. And there's a link in here that goes into kind of all the details of the pilot, but it is a new opportunity, and it is something that would, you know, be available to East Bay Township as well. Some people call it a PILT, but pilot is what we're calling it. And it's for 15 years, up to 15 years. And once that 15 years is over, you could stack it or use it with another tool like a brownfield TIF or I believe an NEZ. So it does help, and it helps secure, I guess, those rents, guarantee that percentage of the rents will not be passed on, or that tax bill that hired will not be passed on to the tenants for a certain point of time.
And on February 1st, which is a Thursday at noon, Michigan Townships Association, the Grand Traverse County chapter, is having a speaker come and talk to us about some of the new legislation and the implementation of that. That'll be Ann Jamison, who I know our township board has met before. She works with the county in the Brownfield capacity. And she presented to, I believe it was the Brownfield Authority or the Land Bank, just about a month or so ago, when these were just getting implemented. And so she's going to visit with township officials at that February 1st luncheon. So watch your emails for that. That is for township boards. Planning commissions are absolutely welcome to attend. And Tracy, if you don't receive the email, please reach out to Tracy, and she'll have the information on where and when and so forth.
Yeah, and I would just say the other two on here, the residential facilities and attainable housing ones, those are very new, and it depends on the level of investment. One is for $5,000 or less, and one is for $50,000 or more in the number of units. So some of these tools do allow for someone not a developer or just a smaller scale person to invest in a rental or a for sale home and ask for a tax abatement as well. But those require a district or a boundary to be drawn. And Frankfurt, when they get through those, that would be a good city or village to kind of, see how it's played out in their community.
Glenn?
Question on these small houses, tiny houses, whatever. I keep thinking about in the city on Woodmere, between Center Street and Carver Street, they had went in there and put in, I'm not sure if it was 4 or 6 tiny houses in there, but I've never seen any more build out, and I'm just wondering how that worked out. Apparently, there was some problems or something, or?
I don't know about that specific project, but I do know since in the last few years, many communities have reduced their minimum build out, their square footage minimum, and so now smaller square footage homes are allowed. So I don't know if there's been a shift since then, but I think people are looking at it, and yeah, I think it is something that some people are developing for sure, smaller square footage homes. I think it plays out in some of this as more opportunities within an apartment or a multifamily unit where you would have different types of unit sizes to be able to accommodate different housing needs.
Okay.
Claire, would you just talk a little bit about that density, the disparity that had existed with the previous zoning ordinance and the future land use map, and how that's being changed to become more in alignment?
Sure. So we are looking at the draft ordinance, or the draft zoning ordinance that we have in place. We're looking at changing the density really only for the area within the urban growth boundary. So the low-density residential, the moderate-density residential, and the high-density residential. All the other districts, the rural residential, the lakes area, the ag district, Boardman River, we're definitely not looking at increasing the density. We're looking at potentially reducing the density. So instead of allowing 1 unit per acre, allowing 1 unit per 2.5 acres. However, within the urban growth boundary, right now in our low-density residential, we allow 3 units per acre, but our master plan says up to 5. So we're looking at bumping that up to 5 dwelling units per acre. For our moderate density residential, the Planning Commission actually just held a public hearing and is recommending the change kind of ahead of the ordinance rewrite. But right now, moderate density is 5 dwelling units per acre. We're looking at bumping that up to 8 dwelling units per acre, consistent with our master plan. And then in our high density residential, we're currently at 8, and we're looking at bumping that up to 12 dwelling units per acre, consistent with our master plan. I will say that with looking at the density bonus, that could potentially be an additional 25%. So for high-density residential, we could potentially go up to 15 dwelling units per acre if there was an affordability guarantee for a certain period of time and a certain area income as a part of that project. Same as moderate density residential, as opposed to the 8, you could bump up to 10 dwelling units per acre with that density bonus for providing an affordability guarantee. The other thing we're looking at that will be a change is so currently in our moderate density and our high density districts, we allow multifamily, so really any type of dwelling is permitted in those districts. But in our low density right now, we only allow single family detached for the most part. So we're looking at allowing duplexes as a use by right. We're looking at allowing triplexes, quadplexes, even row homes, I think up to 6 attached homes through a special land use permit. So we're looking at just providing some more flexibility for infill development, allowing ADUs as a use by right.
To mentally paint the picture, I'm real interested to hear what per acre the density was of that Acme project over there, because everybody's driven by it. That's over at the old Target, or the old Tom's. Tom's.
Yeah, so.
Just ballpark.
mic.
Sorry. Yeah, so Chris Ostrowski again, great question. And it was 15 units per acre, and we asked for more because we want to preserve the land.
Sure.
And the whole thing is people thinking this correctly, that the density thing doesn't mean there's less development and we're going to protect the land by cutting it down. It's the developer can afford to build a building, a bigger building, 24 units in one building is more affordable for the developer, which the rents come down, which we have more land. So just keep that big picture in mind, that we think that only having a small amount per acre is going to be better. It's not always better when we're talking about more affordable housing. And one last thing, the pilot program, I helped with that pilot program over a year to get that through. Most developers don't want a pilot program. Okay? The city of Traverse City is taxing an apartment building as condos. This is how they do it. They're supposed to get as much tax as humanly possible where they're doing it. Well, if you're being taxed as a condo, you have to pay, that passes on to the city of Traverse City is saying we're doing everything we can for affordable housing, but we're taxing you at the very highest tax bracket humanly possible, so the developers want a pilot, payment in lieu of, and then doing that, being able to say that part of this we will pass on to the renter to help us be able to develop. So the pilot's great, but it's really a Band-Aid. It's really to tax them for what they are, not for what they're not. So, and the developers don't want a tax break. They just want to be taxed as they're supposed to be. And I deal with 8, 10 big developers in Traverse City, and none of them want that. But they have to do it to be able to afford to build the building. Okay, so that will help you. And the builder is in this building that built those units, so maybe afterwards I can introduce you. Okay?
Thank you for the clarity.
You're welcome.
And just to keep on that vein, because a lot of this jargon right here is all kind of policy driven, right? And I don't know if we have a history of applying any tools tax abatement wise, or do we?
Yeah, we do.
We do?
In East Bay. Mhm.
So I'd be real curious to see like what the application looks like from, maybe that's something the legal counsel can kind of walk us through in terms of, where or why we would consider using each one of those tools for different types of development.
Yeah, one of the things that we did when we were looking at different types of tax abatements previously is we had an application that really identified and scored points for it, so we knew exactly where we were at with that and how much it fit the goals of that program. So we'll look to do that as other municipalities are right now with these coming in. And I think the county as well is taking a look at, and we encourage that they do a points analysis on it. So.
That's great. Good to hear.
Yep.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to ask, I don't know who would look into it, but when we start talking pilot programs, the problem is all the taxpayers pay quite a price for emergency services. And when you take away taxes from any individual, they don't pay the special assessment for emergency services. That law needs to be changed because what you end up doing if you have a lot of pilots is everybody else is paying for the emergency services, not them. And so the price just keeps going up to the regular homeowner. That has to be looked at, and I'm sure that can be turned around. I forget when the law was passed. It's been quite a few years ago, but that's something that would help, probably with pilots, because that's the drawback I have to pilots, is when you give a pilot, then the residents that are already living here are paying the extra for the emergency services.
Yeah, I will follow up with that, but my understanding is with the pilot, most of the essential services are made whole through these processes. So I will follow up and get back to you on that. I know the Brownfield TIF for sure, that the emergency services and a lot of the essential services are paid first, and then, so I will clarify that with you.
I remember going through the law, and Senator McManus is the one that signed onto that law whenever, this back quite a few years ago, but said if you're relieved of paying property taxes, they cannot charge you for any other special assessments, so.
Okay, I will clarify that with Beth and Claire in a follow-up memo so that you understand that fully.
Yeah, what they're doing now is they tend to do like a developer agreement with that. So this, I mean, they're a special assessment. They're not a tax, but that is how it's done, and.
I know that
Yeah.
when one group does not pay taxes to veterans, you cannot charge them for special assessment.
Yeah.
And that was the issue that said, and I don't remember exactly how it was written, but it said something about if you're relieved of paying taxes, you cannot be charged for special assessment.
And I'm not sure if it's through statute or if it's through case law, but I do think that that's the case. But you can also, when you go through to approve these, carve out in an agreement the emergency services. So we'll look into that. Other questions, comments?
I just have one comment. I think, at least speaking from a planning commission perspective, our work is largely reactionary. We're presented with something, and then we react to it. And so to get these tools, into the hands of a potential developer, it's difficult for us. I think that it would have to, we'd have to make an effort to make them aware of that prior to them coming before the planning commission. And I don't know if that's something Claire, if it's her interaction with people proposing projects ahead of time, because, again, when we get something, it's usually there in front of us, and probably a lot of the financial work has already been done, so they've made it, whether it can cash flow and all this other stuff. So it's really important to somehow get the word out about this, and I think that's what Jarl's doing, so that, the people who are coming before us know about it ahead of time, so that they can offset some of their costs with these programs or something like that.
Yeah, and tomorrow, the County Board of Commissioners is considering as well, among other things, funding a community development position within the county, which will, one of the things we've talked about with that position through, it's a different board, but is how can that position level the playing field for municipalities who are dealing with these tools, who don't come across them every day? Because with all of the other things that we do, then you have one of these come before you. Might you become pretty well-versed in it if you do several of them, but does that put an advantage for the larger townships versus smaller and so forth? So that may be something too we can have some assistance with regionally or cooperatively through the county and Traverse Connect and so forth. Other questions? Okay, well, if that, we're going to move on to public comment. And with public comment, if there are any outstanding issues that you have questions on, and we typically don't do this, but please let us know the topic, and, we can, or the question, and we can try to follow up with you or information with that. So that would be an opportunity for you to garner further information. Anything else before we move on to that public comment then? Okay.
I think we're ready.
All right. So this is a second opportunity for public comment. If you'd like to address the board, please come up and reintroduce yourself or introduce yourself and make comment. How are you?
Chris Ostrowski, thank you guys again. To clarify too, we wanted 25 or 30 per acre in Acme, and they just bought the Bertha Voss School, the developer, and they're going to put, because they work so well in density, trying to protect. I don't know if you guys know that there's a big eagle's nest right behind that they're protecting, that they own all this acreage, and they're purposefully doing this the right way. So again, work with these developers on this bigger picture. So don't let that scare you away with 25, 30 per acre, because if they do it right, it's really good for the community. Number two, you said something about look back. There's a way construction codes, if I'm going to go from an apartment to a condo, there's a 5-year look back. So they have to build it correctly if they're going to be condos and do the bait and switch thing. So some developers strictly apartments, some are condos and developers. So it happened in Traverse City at Trail 45. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. They had their marketing plan all ready to go the minute that 3-year hit. So they did that on purpose. So I think, so I shouldn't say that, but it switched right away. Most developers don't do that. Some are just good at apartments. Some are really good at condos. Really, they're good at both. They don't like doing both. So, and then last thing for everybody, this pilot program, if you're going to adopt it or look at it, there's a lot of really good people at the city of Traverse City. When we said the word pilot to them a year ago, blank look, they all understand it like the back of their hand. It's a lot simpler than it sounds. It's a lot easier than it sounds. So don't let it scare you away. In the city, they'd be glad to help you guys because they really did a big 180. And it was unanimous for both pilots to be approved in less than a year. That's a big deal. So don't let that scare you guys, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. And just so you guys, I think you guys all do know, but Claire and I interact regularly with other municipalities and those elected officials in looking at, how to implement these and what is the other municipality doing, beg, borrowing, and stealing. I mean, we don't have to be original in this. Additional public comment?
Trey Allman with a Novo Development in Traverse City. I guess I have less of a comment, more of a question, though I don't expect an answer tonight, is really understanding how the growth boundary was set. And I think you guys referred to it as the urban boundary. I do understand what they are. I work with them quite a bit, but understanding the logic that went into it, given that usually it is to focus growth in a specific area of a township. And in this case, the majority of your growth boundary is low density, frankly. So just really trying to understand or asking that logic and how it was set and what drove that line and where it was at.
Thank you. Additional public comment? And if there's anyone else after, please feel free to make your way up and stand behind. Hi.
As a past developer, Sally Erickson, past president of Home Builders, also have done multiple units and multiple developments. We do look for the tools. Our goal is to be very savvy. You would provide us with a group of tools, and as the developer, it's our job to make sure that we're looking over what's best and what fits the market and what our goals are for what kind of a neighborhood we're hoping to bring to the community. So I think that the developers are savvy. They will use your tools. They will come see Claire and Beth, and they will come see you guys to find the best things that they can do with their land. And I am very hopeful that you will move towards having the area that is in that urban growth raised with density. And I like that we can have different types of units. Our flagship development was mostly duplexes, threeplexes, fourplexes, and cluster housing, and that allowed for us to keep a lot of the area open and beautiful. So if you give us those tools, the developers will build you beautiful neighborhoods. As to building cost, I think that the building costs that were presented tonight are pretty spot on. It is in the $250 to $300 a square foot range. That might sound really crazy, but that's where it is right now. And builders don't make hand over fist money. We're on the hook for a long time for warranty. And an average builder, if they take home 15% after it's all said and done, they're lucky. So they're not out there raping and pillaging as far as what they're taking home for take-home pay. But they are hardworking people, they're honest, they're real, and they're a really important component in the type of community that we have in Traverse City. So thank you.
Thank you.
Carol Kusel, East Bay Township resident. I offer my gratitude to the trustees who carefully and deliberately reviewed the GORIC PUD and listened to the outpouring of concerns by many citizens. Recently, several pieces of a very complex acquisition process have been falling into place to add significant acreage to the Brown Bridge Quiet Area, right here in our township. I'm sure you're all aware of that. If the GORIC PUD had passed, this extensive addition would very likely not have been possible. Thank you, trustees, for that deliberate thinking process, questioning, listening to citizens. Happy holidays.
Additional public comment? Okay, with that, is there any other comments from the boards? You'll see that we have a January 3rd Planning Commission meeting on the calendar and January 8th for the Board of Trustees. And then our Board of Trustees should look for a special meeting for zoning amendments prior to December 31st, which keeps us good with our auditors and accountants. So if there's nothing further, yep.
What time are the site plan reviews for planning commission on the 3rd? 4:30?
4 p.m. and 4:30.
4 p.m., okay.
All right, if there's nothing further, then we stand adjourned. Everybody have a good evening. Thank you for coming.